What's up, guys? Welcome to part 3 of the S13 single cam KA turbo build. Stay tuned because in the middle of the video we got a little bit of a cool thing going on. See you then. Let's go. Alright guys, so a little bit of an update on what's going on with this. We'll go over what we did in the first part and the second part of the series. In the first part on this, we actually had to un-F some of the things that were done by the previous person who worked on it, which was the owner of the car. Now, just to give him a little bit of credit, he doesn't really know a whole lot about cars and he was trying to get into it, so he really wanted to, kind of dive into this project head first. He got to a certain point of it and he realized, hey, listen, this really isn't my cup of tea. I bit off more than I can chew. I'm going to take it to someone who knows what they're doing to get it finished up. So hence why it's here and what we're doing. In step 1, we basically went over, in part 1 rather, we went over everything that he did, and we pretty much had to take apart a lot of the car and get things correct. We had to add some bolts to the exhaust manifold. We had to mount the turbo properly. We had to tighten things down. We had to do a bunch of stuff. Then we moved on to part 2. In part 2, we did the oil filter housing adapter. We did the oil feed line for the turbo. We did the oil drain line for the turbo. We welded in the bung, and we did a few other odds and ends. In part 3 today, we are actually going to be mounting the downpipe, trying to get the exhaust situated so that we can see how much of the piping that came along with this kit is actually going to function and how much of it we're going to have to actually modify to get everything to fit right. Now remember, guys, this car has every factory accessory, power steering, air conditioning, all in the factory locations. We're turboing it with all that stuff functional. So we're going to need to make sure that everything works, everything clears, our downpipe clears, we're heat wrapped so we don't have excess heat in the engine bay, all of that wonderful stuff. So we're going to get onto that now. We're going to start by mounting the downpipe and see what we can do with that, how well that fits. There's an AC line that's kind of in the way. So we're going to get that done, bring you guys with me. We'll see what happens there. And yeah, so here we go. Alright guys, here's the big gaggle of tubing that comes along with this kit. We have all our intercooler piping, we have our downpipe, we have some more intercooler piping and a few other odds and ends. Now, here's what makes me nervous about downpipes like this. Now, you can see on this side that we've got clearly have a ridge right here where the pipes don't quite meet up right. And then on this side we also have another ridge where the pipes don't quite meet up right. We're going to have to check this flange for straightness to make sure that that's good. And then we got to get this on the turbo and actually see if it's going to come down and clear all of our tubing and everything else. So we're going to get under the hood. We're going to try to mount this in. We'll see what it looks like, and hopefully everything fits right. Alright, so before we can fit the downpipe, we have got to get this factory system out of the way. So I highly doubt we're going to be using the catalytic converter again. And this car actually has an aftermarket 2.5-inch exhaust that is still halfway decent. So I think we're going to use it. But what we got to try to do now is I've been soaking these for a couple of days. We're going to try to remove these bolts. It doesn't really matter if we break them, but it'd be easier if they just came off. So here we go. Wow. Guess there's a first for everything, huh? Alrighty, there's the factory setup. Now we can put the aftermarket one in. I just don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, and I can't find my light for the life of me right now. Maybe the lighting's good enough. You can actually see that the tube is hitting the factory AC line, so we're going to have to, number 1, move that AC line. Number 2, definitely wrap this downpipe, and it is very, very close to the brake booster and the master cylinder, both the turbo and that. So we're going to have to run a turbo blanket, and we're going to have to wrap that downpipe and potentially put a heat shield in to cover this area here so that we're not destroying the brake booster or melting the actual reservoir or anything like that. So we're definitely going to have to do a lot of heat protection under here, guys. And of course the kit doesn't come with that specific deal. So let's bring it up in the air. We'll check underneath it. We'll see what we got for clearances on that downpipe, and then we're actually going to try and fit, if we can find it, which I think it is back here somewhere, It is. We're going to try to fit this mid pipe, which is supposed to delete the cat. So we will see if we have enough length here with this piece of pipe to actually delete the cat, or if we're going to have to do some modification. So up we go. Alright, so now let's see what we got for clearance. Well, nothing. Nothing at all. And this is why that little kick that I showed you in the pipe makes all the difference in the world, because that kick is on a perfect angle with why this is hitting the transmission right now. So what we're going to need to do is, hopefully if we're lucky, there's enough play in the holes to where we can move this over and tighten everything up so that we're not actually laying directly on the transmission. But now what we're going to be concerned with is actually fitting this pipe over to this pipe here, which hopefully we have enough length and everything fits the way that it's supposed to. And then this way we won't have to make a cat delete pipe, we won't have to make a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to find the bolts for this stuff now, we'll mock it all up and see how it looks. So, in the middle of the S13 build, and this must be red car week or something, everything I have to work on is red. The S13, the Prelude, and everything else. Well, in the middle of that, we got another cool car that showed up for a little bit of intercooler work. That is an Alpha 9 GTR, freshly built by Weapons Grade Performance. We got to weld some Dash 8 bungs into a couple of the intercooler pipes so that he can vent the catch can back into the intake, because the odor from the catch can venting off is horrendous and it makes it back into the car. So we're going to get those pipes off of there, we're going to bring them back here, drill them out, weld some Dash 8 bungs in the intercooler piping, put them back in, connect everything up. We'll see how it goes. Alright guys, so what we need to do basically is that this catch can here, the Alpha catch can, actually vents right down in here into atmosphere. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to weld some Dash 8 bungs right here, one right there, and then one right there in these intercooler pipes. Now all we have to do to get those out is literally take out these clips, which always end up falling somewhere. And of course it's going to be super difficult to film. But take out all these clips. Pull this cover. And we basically have a clamp there to get the filter off on that side, a clamp there, clamp back there, clamp back there. We'll pull the pipes off, we'll take them out, we're going to get them over to the table, drill the holes, and weld them up. So we'll be back in a second. Alright, so all we got to do is just pull these up and out of the boot, which gets fun. One-handed's even better. So I'm going to put you guys down right here. There we go. Then you just got to twist them. Pull them right out. Alright, let's get these over to the table. Now that we got them on the table, basically what we're going to do is we're going to pull each one of these mass airflow sensors out so that we don't damage them with the heat from the weld. We're going to drill a hole just shy of the actual sensor. The filter goes on this end, so we're going to drill right about here. Put a fitting there, put a fitting there, and then we'll be good to go. We'll throw a little bit of black paint on it, make it look hunky-dory. So I'm going to get to drilling the holes in these, pulling these sensors out. These are the two fittings we'll be using. We'll come back when we're ready to weld them. Alright guys, we got the holes drilled, we got the fitting in, we're going to tack it up and then weld it all the way around. So here goes. It's all done, and here's what it looks like in the car. So we got one right there, and we got one right there. So now we can take the two outlets of the catch can up here, and instead of running them down the atmosphere, they will run back into the intake and recirculate, which will stop any of the odor that's getting into the cabin. So all done. Just got to put this panel back on, and it's ready to go. Okie dokie. So we have this all temporarily clamped in place, and the reason we have it clamped in place is, again, eBay kit. Hardware is optional. Apparently they didn't feel like including it for the downpipe, so we clamped it in place just to make sure that everything's going to fit. I don't know how well you guys can see that though. You see how it's got this angle right here? Well, that's because these flanges right here don't meet up very well, and you have to draw this one up this way. Now the problem that it's causing is it's putting a little bit of downward pressure on this flex joint, which makes the exhaust kind of come down at an angle and then go back up to meet the rest of the exhaust system. Now this isn't the end of the world, because this flex joint will take up the slack for that. However, that does put excess stress on this flex joint, and over time it will actually wear out a little bit quicker than it should, because the angle of this tube is just slightly off. I mean, they could have kicked it up a little bit, maybe a little bit more degree on this bend, and everything would have lined up straight, and then we wouldn't have this slight angle. Because now this is technically the lowest part of the exhaust system, and luckily this car isn't super low, so not going to cause very many problems. But we're going to run to Home Depot, grab some hardware for this stuff, you know, grab some nice hardware to get all of this bolted together. We'll get all this bolted together, and then we'll be good. Now, pro tip, because I know you guys like these: whenever you're mocking up an exhaust system, especially one on a car like this where you don't know that things are going to fit and the tolerances are very, very close and everything else, you need to make sure that you put every single gasket in place while you're doing your mock-up. And you might ask, why would I put the gaskets in? I run the risk of breaking them and, you know, this, that, the other thing. Well, if you think about it, now we've got a gasket at the turbo. We have a gasket here at this flange. We have a gasket here at this flange. And you could potentially have a gasket here at this flange had this not been a slip fit. Now, where that comes into play, if these are normal gaskets, then they average about a 1/16 of an inch thick. Each one of those is a 1/16 of an inch. If you've got 4 of them, that is a 1/4 of an inch. Now, a 1/4 of an inch might not sound like a lot. However, that 1/4 of an inch makes a huge difference, especially if your exhaust is going this way a 1/4 of an inch, or that way a 1/4 of an inch, or down a 1/4 of an inch, or it needs to clear something by a 1/4 of an inch. You could potentially mock this up and go, oh my god, it doesn't fit, it fits like crap, and then modify it, put all your gaskets in, and then realize it still doesn't fit because it took into account for all of the gasketing. Now these gaskets are probably a 1/16 or a little bit thinner, and there's 3 of them, so you're looking at 3/16 worth of space. Now you have basically 2/16 or an 1/8 of an inch in movement this way, because you have a horizontal or a vertical gasket here and a vertical gasket here. So that gives you an 1/8 of an inch moving in this direction. Then you have a 1/16 of an inch moving up or down. So you have to make sure that all your gaskets are in so that you know that your exhaust system is going to fit properly. I know it's a little bit of a pain in the ass because you have to take everything back down and put everything back in again, whatever, but put your gaskets in place. If you don't, you're going to be sorry. I promise you. Okay, so we picked up the hardware for the exhaust. Now, one thing I recommend highly is I see a lot of times people using washers upon lock washers upon everything else. Well, there's nothing better than getting yourself a serrated, flanged nut and bolt for doing exhaust work, because then you don't need washers. The flanges on the bolts actually take up, and also not only do they take up the space that you would normally use with a washer, but they're serrated, so they bite into the metal and they will not come loose, because obviously you can't use nylock on exhaust because the nylon in the nut burns out. So use a serrated fastener, use a fastener that fits the hole properly. You tighten everything down, you'll have a nice positive fixed bolt that's bitten into the flanges. So use the correct hardware. Now we're going to pop this last bolt in this downpipe. We got one more bolt left here. Cinch everything down. We'll tighten up these 2 guys right here so that this mount is tightened up, and we will be good to go on the exhaust. The exhaust will be 100% done. Alright guys, so I think that's where we're going to end this one. I was going to do the intercooler stuff, but you know what, by the time I get the intercooler mounted, get all the piping done, get everything mocked up, get all the holes cut, everything else, that'll be an episode all in within itself. So I think we're going to call episode 3 part 3 a finale. We got the exhaust completely done, everything is up and where it should be, all the mounts are in, we got all new hardware, everything else. Just a little quick note, I know I mentioned the bolts being serrated and flange headed and everything else. Now that's all well and great. One suggestion I can make to you guys, I don't know how often I run to import cars with aftermarket exhaust on them, and whoever put the exhaust on just runs to Home Depot or Harbor Freight or wherever, and they get American bolts for a foreign car that has all metric bolts. It's a little nitpicky thing, and it doesn't really matter because a fastener is a fastener, but you know what? If you're working on a car that has mainly metric fasteners, keep it all metric. It just makes it easier to work on in the future. You don't need as many tools, and you know, you're not going to be searching for a 7/16 wrench or an 11 millimeter or something off the norm. Use metric fasteners. They're available everywhere. So flange bolts, serrated so they grab. You don't need lock nuts. You don't need lock washers. You don't need washers, period. Use the right size bolt for the right size hole with the proper, shall we say, measuring system. So metric for cars that use metric fasteners, American for cars that use American fasteners. And yeah, that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I can keep bringing you more. We have a couple more parts left on this. We're probably going to go 6 or 7 total, I think, maybe. But this was part 3. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed this kind of new style of, beginning and ending videos. We'll see how it works. But that's it for me for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking, commenting. You guys are amazing. I will see you on the next one. Have a great afternoon.